everybody, and welcome back to INTR 101 College Success Strategies. Today's lecture is all on goal setting, and the first thing that you'll notice is that I make really terrible memes. So expect more of these awful memes as we go through the course. But anyway, let's dive into goal setting. So I think this is a really common thing. Folks tend to make a vague list of things that they'd like to accomplish, but they don't generally take the time to really flesh out how they're going to accomplish those things or what about those things makes them a goal. So what we're going to do is kind of dive into the goal setting process, and we're going to talk about success and how our definition of success should play into our goals. So first, I want to have you all take a moment and think about what is challenging about setting and completing goals. I know for me, it's staying on task. I tend to have some really lofty ideas, but when I actually go through and try and complete them, I don't have a plan, or I get distracted by other things going on in life, and I end up not finishing some of the things that I set out to finish. So that's one challenge, and there's lots of different challenges that you might run into. So what we're going to talk about, and the framework that we're going to work through for this lecture, is something called an IDAHO goal, which the coaching team came up with because we adore acronyms and we wanted to make it very on brand. So the acronym stands for identifying a goal, or what you actually want to do, deciding the duration, so figuring out how long the goal will take, actualizing the steps, asking yourself, okay, what are the steps to complete it? And then help and accountability. So what resources are available to help you attain your goal? And then observe your progress or check in with yourself. Ask yourself, how is it going? So what we're going to do is kind of go over these different steps and talk about some of the ins and outs of them. So when you identify your goal, there's a couple things that you want to keep in mind. Your goal should be specific and achievable. So a lot of times I'll work with students and I find that their goals are kind of vague, right? They're like, I want to do good this semester, which is awesome. But what does doing good in a semester mean to you? What is sort of a benchmark that you're trying to achieve? So an example of a goal that's a little bit more specific is I want to complete my English 101 assignment early, right? So that tells you a specific assignment in a specific class and that you want to get it done early. Now, there aren't really any questions about what the goal is. My only complaint is, what does early mean? How early are you trying to complete that? But some of those things play into our next step, duration. Now, I mentioned this at the top of the lecture, but when you're identifying your goal, you also want to identify what success is in regards to that goal. So you want to consider what your definition of success is, and it might be different for every different goal that you have. But kind of contemplate, what does success look like to you? If you say that you want to do well in a class, what is successfully doing well? Is that getting an A? Is that getting a B? Is it feeling like you really understand the material? You know, really kind of dive into what a successful goal will be for you. And then how does that play into the completion of your goal? You know, if you said you wanted to get an A in a class, but success is getting anything higher than a B, that's going to add some flexibility to you. And that's a lot, or that's a really important thing to keep in mind when goal setting. So defining success matters because our personal definition of success helps motivate us when we're going through rough times. So if your definition of success for doing well in a class was having a firm understanding of the material, then when you get a little bit behind, or if a test doesn't go super well, you can bounce back a little bit easier when you think about how you're defining doing well in that class. Because if you still feel like you're pretty confident with the material, then you're still on track to completing your goal. And keep in mind that we're more likely to complete our goals when we define what a finished goal will look like, right? So if we're trying to define a finished goal based on, some other weird definition of success that isn't our own, it's going to be a lot harder to complete it. So keeping that in mind for yourself really helps in the long run. And defining success ourselves allows for more flexibility and can help us bounce back if things don't go as expected. So I kind of mentioned this earlier, but you can think of it in long-term goals as well. So if your goal is to complete your degree and feel confident in it, then you're gonna have a little bit more flexibility in there. So if you go by sort of society standards or your parents' requests of finishing something in 4 years and it takes a little bit longer, then it's going to feel really rough. But if you broaden your definition and if you think about, oh, I just want to finish this degree and I want to feel good about it, that allows for some flexibility in how long it might take you to finish that goal. So just keep in mind that defining success for yourself is really critical, it's really important, and it'll help you in a lot of different ways in life, not just in academics. So when you're defining success for yourself, it's good to contemplate the following questions. So what is the goal you're working towards? What will make you feel accomplished? And how can you balance challenges and rewards? So sometimes we push ourselves really, really hard and we're like, I want to be the absolute best. I want to be number one in my field. I want to be perfection. And that's a really, really high bar to meet. And it's good to challenge yourself. We really should challenge ourselves because it helps us grow. However, if you set an impossibly high bar for yourself, it's going to be much, much, much harder to reach it, and you're more likely to feel really discouraged. So setting a goal that both challenges you, but ensures that you can actually achieve it is really important. So if we think back to that kind of first slide where we talk about identifying our goal and making sure it's achievable, that's where this really plays into it, right? So making sure that you're setting yourself up to meet your definition of success will help in the long run. All right, so we talked about identifying our goal and how our definition of success plays into that. Now let's talk about deciding the duration or figuring out how long our goal is going to take us. So goals need deadlines. If we set some vague dream but never really give a point at which we want to accomplish it, it makes it really hard to commit to that dream. So make sure to set a timeline for yourself. And kind of playing into that, like the next thing that comes up is, okay, I've got my goal, I've got my deadline. How am I going to get there? What are the steps that I'm going to take? So when we talk about actualizing the steps, what I mean is that we're going to take our really big goal, our really big task, and break it up into much smaller steps to make it easier to accomplish. So you're going to develop an action plan. And this is something that we'll talk about a lot throughout this class. Action planning is a really critical skill to learn in college and in life. But the main point, like I said before, is breaking down larger tasks and projects into smaller chunks. And when you're doing that, you're going to list the steps and deadlines. So we talked about duration for like an ending point, but you also want to consider intermediate deadlines throughout the process, right? So if your main goal is to complete an English paper 4 days before the deadline, you want to think about in your action plan, what are some other benchmarks that you want to hit to make sure that you stay on track with completing that goal? So when you're actually developing your action plan, it's important to also consider possible barriers that might come up and some solutions to those barriers. And when you're thinking about these in your steps, one thing that can be really useful is to make sure that you provide some flexibility in your schedule when it comes to completing it. So if your final deadline was, say, October 31st for completing a goal, it might be good in your action plan to aim for completing it on October 29th. That way you have a little bit of wiggle room, and it can make sure that you stay on track, but that you still have that flexibility. When you're also considering some of the barriers, make sure to reflect on your support and find some go-to people to kind of have in your back pocket in case something pops up that's hard to deal with. So here's an example of an action plan, right? So let's say I want to complete my paper for English 101 by October 27th. So now I'm going to kind of divide out how I actually want to go about doing this. So I'm going to schedule an appointment with the Writing Center on the 19th. I'm going to prepare a rough draft by the 21st. I'm going to submit that rough draft on the 22nd to the Writing Center. And then I'm going to edit that draft with the writing tutor's suggestions by the 24th. And I'm going to submit a final draft by the 26th. So you can see in this example that I kind of used some of the different tips that I brought up. So I allowed for a little bit of wiggle room by wanting to submit a day before the deadline, and giving myself some days in between when I make appointments and when I submit things so that I have time for myself to get everything done. This also helps in case something pops up. Maybe there's an unexpected math assignment that I forgot to do. Well, I have a little bit of flexibility in my schedule in order to get everything done. So we've got our goal, we've got a deadline, we've got a plan. Now we're going to talk more about help and accountability. So I brought this up when I talked about actualizing the steps. I was like, hey, think about some barriers that might pop up. So it's responsible and professional to use your resources. And those resources are there for you when these barriers and obstacles get in the way of you completing your goal. So this was a really great quote by the former director of academic success of the College of Law. And it's something that we use a lot in coaching to remind folks that getting help doesn't mean there's something like horribly wrong. It just means you're being professional, you're being responsible, you're getting out there, you're getting some assistance to complete your goals and to make it a lot easier on yourself. So some resources that are available to you are things like academic coaching, so what I do, career services, the Counseling and Testing Center, drop-in tutoring, the LGBTQA office, the Office of Multicultural Affairs, SI Pass, and the Women's Center. So these are all amazing resources that you can bake right into your overall goal. So in that first example, I talked about using one of my favorite resources, the Writing Center. So if it's possible, when you're developing your action plan for your goal, try and embed some of these services into that plan so that you have that help and accountability all throughout the process. Maybe your goal is to apply for an internship. Make sure you include visiting with career services right off the bat, because they're going to help you make sure that all of your application materials are as useful as possible. Maybe your goal is to get an A in a class. Make sure to incorporate when there's tutoring for that class, because a tutor can really help you have a much more successful time in a class than if you're just trying to struggle on your own. So really make sure to think about and be mindful of all of the different help and support that's available to you on campus that you can use in your pursuit of your goals. So we're down to our last letter, O. Observe your progress. And what this means is check in with yourself. You know, you have a plan worked out for your goal. Make sure as you're going through it, you're checking in to see if you're on track, if things are going as planned, if maybe you need to adjust something. So when we set a goal and just kind of like hope for the best and work for it without checking in with ourselves, we really miss out on a lot of opportunities to reshape our plans, to make it more effective for ourselves, and to make it a better experience overall. So as you're making goals, maybe they're semester-long ones, pick a little time in your schedule to return to kind of your plan for that goal and just see how it's going. And also consider like how you might observe that, right? So, sorry, go back a slide. Maybe that means like editing your paper. If your goal was to write a super long paper, observing your progress might be like, okay, I'm going to go back and reread and edit the first 5 pages to see kind of how it's going before I continue on with the last 5 pages. So just find little ways to observe your progress. All right, now let's try it out. So I've got a couple of examples that I'm going to go through, and we'll talk about what makes it a good goal or like a well thought out goal versus what could be improved. So for our first example, the goal is to pass Bio 114 Exam 3. It's due November 2nd. Their action plan is to study chapters 15 through 25. They said that they don't need any help. And to observe their progress, they've gotten some studying done already. So what's good about this goal is that it is very specific. They have a specific class and a specific exam that they want to do well in. They have a deadline, but then that's kind of where things get a little foggy. And I really think that there could be a lot more steps incorporated into this. You know, my first question is, how are you going to study chapters 15 through 25? That sounds like a lot of material. What goes into that studying, right? So this goal could use some more structure. We know that there's a lot to cover, but we don't really have any steps for ourselves. Second, this person said that they don't need any help. And maybe that's true. Maybe they feel really, really confident in this class. Maybe they had like a super great, biology teacher in high school, or their parents are biologists, like they feel really confident about it. That's awesome. It's still really important to make sure that you list out what help is available to you, because as awesome as a student may be, maybe there's a term or a concept that pops up that they're like, oh, maybe my understanding isn't as solid as I thought it was. Where do I go get help now? I didn't include this in my plan. So making sure to have those things as a backup for yourself is just a great thing to do. Now, what I do like is that they observe their progress. They said, oh, I've gotten some studying done already. That tells me that they're kind of on the right track. What can be good is to actually create a list of what they've studied, right? They could say, oh, I've already studied chapters 15, 16, and 17, so I'm on track. That would be awesome. Overall, just needs a bit more structure. All right, so our second example. This student wants to apply for a BP internship. The application is due February 15th. For their action plan, they're going to read the application, prepare materials, revise by February 10th, and submit the application by February 14th. For help, they're going to ask one of their friends to look at it. And to observe their progress, they're going to check in on February 10th to see if all of their materials are done. So overall, I think this is a pretty good goal, but again, it could use a little more structure. So we've got some good steps. I think it's awesome that they really thought about, what goes into preparing their materials, but we could use some deadlines, right? Maybe giving themselves an intermediate deadline for when they want to read the application, for when they want to prepare materials. Having a bit more structure there could really help them out in the long run. One other little note is that it's awesome that they're going to have one of their friends look over their application, but it might also be a good idea to include the Career Center in this process, because their whole point, their whole job is helping students get jobs and internships. So having their career advisor look at it could also be really helpful for them. So a couple of things to remember about goal setting. Goals should provide structure and focus for you, for your life. And this can be either in the long term or in the short term. So goals are a really great thing for getting us through college, for getting us through, the week, just giving us kind of an endpoint to work towards. That really helps with motivation. But keep in mind that goals need to be specific. I bolded this because it's really important. So from creation to execution, we want to make sure that our goals are very clear and that they give us the structure that we need. And this is exceptionally important right now when stuff is online, and it's a little hard because we're lacking that structure. So building it ourselves with our goals is really critical. And then the last thing to remember is find some balance. So make sure that you're challenging yourself with your goals. You want to have a goal that gives you an option or an opportunity to grow. But make sure you're being mindful of how easy it is to accomplish your goals. You want to make sure that you're setting a goal that you can complete and not something that just will make you feel more frustrated in the long run, because you want your goal to be motivation for further success. So making sure that you're setting yourself up for that success is really important. Now, what we're gonna do is hop on over to BB Learn so I can show you what the assignment is that goes with this lecture. So where I am is over in weekly content in week 1. And if you scroll down to the bottom past the presentations and the videos, you'll see our 2 deliverables for this week. So the first was the introduction deliverable, and the second is the goal setting deliverable. So I have some instructions here, which are just please fill out and attach the worksheet for an IDAHO goal and submit your finished copy. So the first page provides an example, and the second page is where you can fill in with your own goal. And I discussed the goal setting technique really in depth here, so you can kind of reflect, rewind on this video and see that. But if you click this link, you will get a Word document that looks like this. So as stated, the first page has a example of how to fill out this page, right? So we have identifying the goal for this person. Their second biology exam is in 2 weeks, and I hope to achieve a B on it. So their goal is to get a B. Then we have the duration, so over the next 2 weeks, and then they have some steps. They have what sort of help they're going to go and get, and then they have how they're going to observe it. So they've kind of checked in with themselves about what works and what doesn't. And then if you go to the second page, you'll see a blank copy. So what I want you to do is go through and fill out, what is your goal? When do you want to accomplish it by? What are the steps you're going to take? What sort of help is available? And then how are you observing your progress? So this can be either setting some deadlines for yourself of like, oh, I'm going to check in on this day to see if I've accomplished this amount of stuff. Or it could be something like, in the past, I found that this method wasn't really useful, so now I'm trying this one out and we'll see how that goes. So just indicate some way that you're going to observe how things are going for you. Once you're done with this, just go ahead and hit save. Make sure to save with your name so I know whose is whose. And then go ahead and submit it into the place on BB Learn. So I'll swap back over there. So when you go into this, you'll just click on it and it should let you upload and attach a file. I will include any sort of feedback on these assignments so that you have kind of a clear idea of what's going on. And if there was anything missing that you needed to improve a little bit on, I will let you know there. But with that, that's everything I have on goal setting. If you have any questions, you can always email me at kellyc@uidaho.edu. I am more than happy to answer your questions. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. Bye.